Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. We're going to carry on with Unified Minds decks. This time it's going to be the new Dark Toolbox, coming out completely from this set really. The Weavile GX, the Night City, and both tag teams all coming out of Unified Minds. So let's see if it's going to be a top contender. We'll start off with the basic concept, and that is that these new introductions, the Weavile and Night City coming in one package, really does sort of harp back to Aromatisse. We used to have a Fairy Garden Aromatisse combo to give ourselves a lot of flexibility and helped us move in between different attackers and do sorts of tanking and all that good stuff. And we've sort of got that reborn in a dark form this time. Weavile GX being much tankier. You have 200 hit points, and there's a lot less easy gust than there was in the Aromatisse times. So in theory, the Weavile will stay on board the entire game. And if that's the case, you just get amazing value out of this card like the entire time. So this is a really good selling point for the archetype as a whole, and is something good to note for dark decks going forward. They can always look towards Weavile and Night City as like a nice starting point for this sort of archetype. And then we have both tag teams. They work really well in tandem with one another. The Sabletar and the Umbreon&Darkrai. Both of these are very strong. Darkrai usually performs those early few turns where he's going to use his GX attack to slow the opponent down and use his early sniping, and then it lets you build up to 5 energy cards. Sabletar comes in, he starts swinging, and the game's over. That's the whole idea. And that idea is strong. Taking extra prizes throughout the history of Pokemon has always been good. So it just means you have to normally go through like one tag team and like one Dedenne, or like one regular GX and one Dedenne. Like, that's so crazy. Imagine doing that. Imagine like one T-Tar just going, I will knock out a Blacephalon GX, then I'll knock out Dedenne, and you've taken 6. Like, that's absolutely nuts. Obviously, building up to 5 energy isn't always that easy, but that's like the selling point of this deck. We're trying to build around Sabletar because he can just win the game so quickly, which is amazing. So let's look at the Pokemon. We're going to play 2 of Split of our 2 new tag teams. We'll start off with Umbreon&Darkrai, 270 hit point Dark type. Oh, sorry. Dark type Wheater fighting, and has Psychic Resistance. He has that GX attack, Dark Moon GX, which is low-key like a huge selling point of this deck. For a single colorless, your opponent can't play any trainer cards from their hand during their next turn. So for that 1 colorless cost, you deny all trainers. This doesn't say item, it says trainer. So it stops them playing a supporter, it stops them putting in stadiums to counter yours, all that good stuff. Your opponent is really limited to literally just attaching and attacking. So that's very rough for them, and it does slow opponents down a lot, which is really important for us because we're a setup deck. We need to try and get Sneasles down, we need to try and get Poipoles down, we need to get energies flowing. We really would hate if a 3 energy committed Umbreon&Darkrai just got knocked out on like turn 3 or something. That would be really horrible. So trying to use Dark Moon to buy yourself a turn basically can be vital. And it means that we can get into a Black Lance and then the following turn like move into Greedy Crush. It works pretty fluidly if you're able to get a good Dark Moon GX off. Let's talk about that Black Lance in more detail. It's essentially a scaled up version of Night Spear for 2019. For 2 dark and a colorless, you do 150 to the active. Already it's 2-shotting tag teams, which is great. But you also get to do a 60 damage snipe to one of your opponent's benched GXs or EXs, which is obviously very good. You can try and set up other tag teams on the bench. Obviously, 60 going into 210 from a Greedy Crush is enough to knock out pretty much every tag team out there, which is great. Or you could start piling into maybe a Dedenne on the bench or something else like that. You could just set things up for you. Also worth noting, against Blacephalon specifically, this deck is able to jump B-Strings very easily. Black Lance into Gust into Black Lance, the 2 things that you hit, avoids B-String. So the whole idea is you deny B-String whilst having this amount of hit points. It can get very ugly for them. So that's something to bear in mind. We then have the Sabletar, 280 hit point behemoth of a tag team. It has the Greedy Crush attack. For 4 dark and 1 colorless, you do 210. And if your opponent's Pokemon is a GX or EX that gets knocked out, you take an additional prize card. That's what I was alluding to earlier. You knock out 1 tag team and 1 Dedenne, or you knock out like a regular GX and a Dedenne, and the game's over. So like 2 Greedy Crushes can be all it takes. So building up to that 5 energy is all you need to do to win the game a lot of the time. So that's a really appealing part of this deck. We then have the Gigafall GX attack for 4 dark and a colorless again. You do 250. Now, again, normally you'll use a Dark Moon GX, but do bear this in mind. If you get to 10 energy cards, you can discard the top 15 cards of your opponent's deck. This will only ever happen against things like Shedinja, but it's an auto win for it's auto win against Shedinja if you get your 10 energies on, which is great. So you don't have to worry about teching for that. And just in general, if you have the 5 energy to do 250, that can knock out some tag teams like Pikarom and whatnot. So definitely something to bear in mind. Usually you will Dark Moon GX though. We're going to play one copy of Mew and Mewtwo just to be like a pseudo third copy of both of these tag teams to give us extra outs to finding them. Also, we have a good amount of discarding cards from this deck, things like Hapu and Acro Bike. So it means that you can have that leeway of getting rid of one and still having the Mewtwo and Mew to fall back on to attack with. Also, we do play a couple treasures in here, so the Mew and Mewtwo might be like the most searchable option of the three. Obviously, we have Cherish Balls as well, but the Mewtwo, like, you can find if you're just whiffing everything else, just to get manual attaching onto him if you really have to, knowing that you can just discard or bench one of these guys later down the line and copy those attacks with the Mew Mewtwo, which is also pretty cool. We then have the double Dedenne for, you know, Cherish Ball synergy. Dedenne change is obviously very good, getting Darks in the discard pile for us to start charging up and giving us a fresh hand. Obviously very important in those opening turns. We're going to play Bench Barrier Mew because I still fully respect Pikarom as one of the strongest decks post-rotation. And you do Dedenne like a lot of times with this deck. So protecting against that's huge. Protecting your Nagas and stuff, that's all very important because they are a speedy deck. There's also the Darkrai Prism Star. This is a great way for us to accelerate energy cards. You're able to bench him and attach 2 energies from your hand all at once. So this is a great burst of energy if you're able to accumulate them. We play a reasonably high amount and Viridians, so it's usually pretty able to get 2 energies into play early. This can get you, you know, if you get your Sneasle and Darkrai Prism, it means that you like don't need to find a Naga in those opening turns, which is a pretty big deal because he's just a basic, and it can get you like straight into Black Lance or Greedy Crush that much quicker. So it's a pretty good card to have in the deck. One Ditto, so that it can evolve into one of these 2 stage 1s that we're playing. The double Sneasle and the double Weavile. I've already mentioned how important Weavile's ability is because we usually try and go from a Darkrai attacking with Black Lance on turn 2. So that's like Weavile helping out either with a Nag or with the Darkrai Prism, moving those energies onto him so you can Black Lance on turn 2. And then if your Darkrai hasn't got knocked out, you can then go into the Sableye the following turn, again with the help of charging ups or manual attachments and whatnot. You can get there. So this Weavile is integral for its ability alone. It does have the Claw Slash attack that can do a vanilla 130. If you're up against non-GX decks, that's something I guess you could consider. And the Night Command GX attack, which again is only ever used if you're really in trouble, but it can help you search your deck for some basic Pokemon and put them into play. So if you're really struggling and you've got nothing else, Weavile can have a panic mode option. We then have a 2-2 Naga line. Charging up is still really important for this deck, so we can get into that big Greedy Crush because it is an expensive attack cost. Don't get it twisted. You really do need to get these Nagas into play if you're going to try and reasonably get a Sableye out. We then come to the trainers. This is a really tight list. I want to start off by saying that. We're playing 2 different stage 1s. It's basically like the New Age Naga Quag in many ways, but they are cheaper attack costs and the energies like retain a lot more, but you can see that there are some compromises having to be done here. I'm only playing 2 treasure, only 3 com, only 3 acro bike. Like, I'd like basically all of these to be 4 ofs, but we have had to make spaces here and there. We do get to play 4 Cherish Ball so that we can find all of our GXs, and most notably Dedenne for like a fresh 6-card hand in those opening turns. We are also playing 4 copies of Custom Catcher. I've mentioned so often that like knock out something plus Dedenne is the win con. So really 1 Gust is all we need to like close a game a lot of the time. Also, these custom catches are integral for having a reasonable Blounds matchup. Otherwise, you will get absolutely bodied by them. 2 Night City to retreat between our stuff. And 2 Viridian Forest so that we can get some Dark in the discard pile to help out with Naga. It also means that we can get Dark Energies into our hand for our Darkrai Prism Star. So obviously a good stadium. I'm always a bit edgy having a stadium split, but I think this one makes the most sense. On to supporters, 1 copy of Nanu. I've mentioned a lot that we will Dedenne pretty much turn 1 most games. So Nanuing that into a more relevant Pokemon can be really important. Moving out of our Darkrai Prism Star can be a pretty good deal. Oh, by the way, Darkrai Prism Star does have an annoying attack that like forces sleep on stuff. So he's actually a reasonable attacker when you can like Weavile onto him and stuff. But yeah, Nanuing some useless stuff away to buy yourself more board space to get things like Sneasles back or get into another Darkrai or Sableye or whatever else is pretty nice. I like having the option of a 1-off here just to free up some bench space because it does get pretty tight in here. 2 copies of Hapu, extra discard energy, as well as digging for specific pieces can be pretty nice. especially digging for things like late game custom catchers for win cons is pretty big. And then we play the straightforward for Lillie, for Cynthia, just to give ourselves some good turn 1 draw, as well as some shuffle draw in general. And then 11 Dark Energy. So as I mentioned, you only ever need 10 when you're up against Shedinja. Usually, like, you need 5. But this gives us plenty of options to have enough for Darkrai Prism, for Viridian, for manual attaching every single turn. These are all integral parts. So you got to play 11. It's a nice high count so that we see them often. There's the full list. It's always in the description as well, if I remember, that is. And yeah, pause now if you want to take a look. But yeah, pretty reasonable split of it all up there. But as you can see, like, the main thing that I take away is that I really want to make space for more comms and Acro Bikes, but custom catchers just are too integral to play to, like, cut them. So, I don't know. I want some spaces here for sure, but this is where I am right now. I think I've got as many mandatory cards as possible in the deck. Onto tech options. Black Market Prism Star might be the first one that you like notice isn't in the deck. I found it way too cute to be using this card. Usually, like, even if a Darkrai Umbreon gets knocked out for like 2 prizes, for example, you're still in really bad shape because you lose a lot of energy cards and you're left using like 1 charging up, 1 attachment, and like that can't get you into a Sabletar. So I think the Black Market, like, it's really good in theory, and obviously there might be those niche moments, but so many decks are playing high stadium counts already, and I feel like there's so many times where the Black Market is just played and is just bad, or like you put it down and then Dedenne, and then you find like Viridian and you want to put that in instead. So I ended up finding it way too niche to actually work in this deck, and a lot of the time we have such tanky GXs, we're going to go from one and just retreat and move into another one so that we like protect our energy cards. That's normally how the deck goes, so like Black Market doesn't really serve a role in my book. Greninja and Zoroark tag team for its big Dark Pulse attack can be a great late game finisher. Usually though, it's like, it's only when you've already won the game by having like 8 energies in play where this is going to do enough, so I've ended up taking it out. And Super Scoop Up is a legitimate card that I've tested with friends and really have like not hated in the deck at all. It can give you some pseudo healing. Obviously you have the Night City and the Weavile to like move the energies around, so you can just pick up something that got damaged, put it back down, reuse it, and that can be a great way back into the game. I think it's especially good against non-GX decks. I haven't really mentioned the non-GX matchups too much, but we're hoping that things like our Psychic Resistance is pretty important against things like Malamar for staying out of 2-hit KO range, and we're also hoping that we can just move between our guys and make life difficult for them. Also, a lot of the time, even non-GX decks can play Dedenne for us to like capitalize on for 3 prize cards, which can be a pretty good deal. So the scoop-ups aren't mandatory, but they definitely do help out in the non-GX matchups. Obviously, we have Darkrai Prism Star, which is a really tanky non-GX that we can use as well. But the scoop-ups definitely help against like early Darkrai getting like damaged, and then you need to like still attack with him that turn, and you want a Black Lance, so you can try and scoop up and heal that damage and go straight back into him, which can be a pretty good deal. Also, it gives us random help at like reusing Dedennes if we really have to. You can see there's a Nanu in the deck because we do find bench space quite tight, so Scoop Up can also help out in that regard. Onto the matchup overview. I've put Tina Chomp Mally as one of our harder matchups. We're currently not having any like answers to Tina Chomp Mally, and that can like go through us pretty quickly because they can just knock out a Darkrai Umbreon like fairly quickly, even with things like the Dark Moon GX attack. Sometimes they can just have the goods. We're giving them things like Viridian, so they can capitalize on that way quicker than like Ultra can. So I think that's one of our worst matchups. Ultra is a little bit more reliant on finding extra energy cards, so I think we have that extra bit of leeway where we just need to knock out 1 Ultra and 1 Dedenne to like win. So I think that's a lot better for us. But Tina Chomp seems to be the most difficult of the Mallies. Blacephalon, I did mention how we can like jump B-String. If ever you do get to jump B-String, you're going to be laughing, of course. But otherwise, they can definitely just rush you down and remove enough energies that we never get towards Sabletar, which is pretty awkward. Aerodactyl, obviously slowing us down with his ability the entire time and having weakness. These things mount up. Obviously, they hit 120. That's 140 with a Diancie. Times that by 2, and they're smacking us pretty hard. So that's probably our worst matchup. Quad Keldeo also is one of those where we only really have things like Darkrai Prism Star. It is tanky, but that's all we really have. It's that and a bunch of Nagas. That's probably not going to be enough. We also have the Darkrai's GX attack that can actually get through 1 Keldeo, bear in mind, but I still think the matchup's pretty poor. Zygarde is hitting you for weakness, of course, and they again have early pressure if they're able to find enough baby Zygardes early. And Breloom Sleep deck is also one of those ones that I think we're going to be very unfavored against, especially if they use the Diancie. They are once again taking one hit KOs on us, and we can't really do much about that. My closing thoughts are that once again, this list is super tight. I really, really want to have more Ball Search because the deck really is reliant on finding early Sneasles, early Poipoles. That Ditto is clutch. So having more Ball Search cards, I think definitely might be worth making spaces for. I just don't know where those spaces come from. Possibly some of the more like luxury cards like Mew and stuff might have to get cut. Maybe even the Night Cities just go, but I think we got to have these so we can shift between Darkrai, Umbreon, and into a Sabltar. So I don't know where our spaces are coming from, but I can definitely see you like rolling your eyes that there aren't enough Ball Search, especially like getting 4 comm in there seems pretty clutch. So I might play around with the deck a little bit more, but the core concept is really strong. Like, the testing I've had with friends with this deck is sometimes you can simply, like, 6-0 people with this deck because you, like, GX attack, then you Darkrai, Darkrai gets hit, you retreat into a Sabltar, Sabltar smacks, then Sabltar gets hit, then Sabltar smacks again, and you win the game. Like, this deck is genuinely capable of taking a 6-0, like, in a lot of matchups if you just tank with your tag teams, so... I mean, the concept is definitely there. It just might be too much, you know? It might be too similar to a Quagnag, where your 2 stage 1s, you need to flood the board of energies, and too much needs to go right for it all to, like, come together. So, yeah. Let me know what you guys think about the Darkrai Toolbox deck. It's more kind of just Sabltar and Darkrai Umbreon, but I'll call it Darkbox just for the sake of simplicity. Because it is all based around the Night City and Weavile abilities and capitalizing on these 2 awesome new tag teams. Overall, I think there's tons of potential here. I think if someone could unlock Dark for Worlds, it's definitely going to be really solid. I'm going to keep working on my Dark list because I don't think this is the finished product. A lot of times I like to put lists out that are simple baselines, but this one definitely feels like there's wiggle room to make changes, but this deck definitely feels close to being very, very strong. So I think it'll go into Worlds possibly as like a low tier 2 contender with a reasonable matchup spread. But if someone is able to unlock this deck, it could genuinely be top tier. I think like the clunk factor is the only thing to work the paces through and figure out. If you're able to do that, the deck is really strong on paper. So let me know what you guys think. There'll be another deck for Unified Minds tomorrow. So I'll see you next time. Cheers.